Now, it's not just here in Australia that we've seen a frightening response on the streets to that October 7th pogrom, those terrorist attacks on Israel. Around the world as well, multiple people were arrested last night in London when hundreds gathered at King's Cross Station and afterwards blocked Oxford Street, rallying for a ceasefire in Gaza. Joining us now from London, writer and great friend of this show, Esther Krakue. Esther, great to see you as always. It's what's happening in London. I mean, the footage we're seeing, it looks like an army of occupation has taken over.
I mean, unfortunately, like every movement, there will always be sort of people that really have no place, even engaging in intellectual discussion, suddenly taking over the conversation. So what we have seen in London is, these massive protests that, on the face of it, the many are advocating for a two-state solution and the pro-Palestine and, trying to highlight the humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza. And then you have literally people shouting jihad in the streets and death to Jews and all these horrific statements that you wouldn't think you would even hear in a civilized country. But for some reason, the worst of our society have crawled out of the woodworks and have made their voices known. I was saying to a friend of mine, I actually had my best friend called me from a bomb shelter in Tel Aviv last year, and for her to know that the country that she grew up in, there are people that have no shame in shouting death to Jews, it's actually horrifying. Suella Braverman has called for the police to deal with these people, but I actually, I'm a free speech absolutist almost in the sense that I think these people should be allowed to speak because we need to know the kinds of views that the people that we live amongst have. Now, obviously, this does take away from the complexity of the issue and from the cause already. Baroness Sayeeda Wardi, who is a conservative peer, has highlighted, her concerns about the humanitarian issue and the nature of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And unfortunately, more sensible, nuanced voices have been drowned out because you have these hate-filled individuals that are marching on the streets of London. And would you believe that these people are planning a protest on Remembrance Sunday? I mean, it really just like, there's no worse way to desecrate the tombs of the people that actually gave them the freedom to even protest in the streets in the first place.
Yes, exactly.
By tarnishing this really remarkable day with this stunt. It really, at this point, I don't think it has anything to do with the Palestinians. I think it's just this ludicrous publicity stunt, and I find it extremely disheartening.
Well, just on that Remembrance Day protest, they're talking about a 1 million man march. And I know this has already upset so many people in the UK, and there's talks about a counter-protest, people showing up and making sure Remembrance Day is not going to be interrupted or wrecked with these protests. Can you tell us about that? There was even calls for military intervention from one MP.
Yes. So, I mean, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, have been very clear that they do not believe this should go ahead. I think anyone with an ounce of common sense knows that this is a terrible, terrible idea. I mean, I can't describe to you how I'm basically at a loss for words that these people really think Remembrance Sunday is the best way to do this. And again, more moderate voices, more sensible voices, the kind of voices that you want to hear on both sides of the debate are being drowned out. I mean, it's you will almost forget that 1,400 Israelis were butchered and murdered on October 7th, given the way the discourse has gone over the last 2 weeks, because you have these extreme voices that have no shame in shouting their hate on the streets of London. And it's really quite unfortunate. Look, I've been very open and I've been very vocal about my support for a two-state solution and highlighting the humanitarian issue in Palestine. But really, I am British. I live in Britain, and I don't think that anybody who lives in this country, who lives in and who values the values of this country can actually defend going onto the streets of London and shouting these sorts of hate-filled chants. I mean, it's genuinely just horrifying, and I really can't believe what I'm seeing. And I mentioned on the Bolt report last week that actually there was a man in the UK that was discovered to have been head of Hamas's terrorist operation in the West Bank, who got British citizenship in 2002 on a relative's passport, and is living in a council house in Barnet, which has the largest Jewish community in this country, on a 50% discount. Most people can't even get on the housing ladder. This man is living in a council house on a 50% discount at the expense of the taxpayer. And really, this is the depth of the issue that we're facing.
So, Esther, then, I mean, there's a couple of sort of issues that this brings up here. Number one, you've got these huge demonstrations of people who really do appear to be, yes, there are many who want a two-state solution or, better treatment for Palestinians or some such, but clearly, there's also a large number of people who really do represent a pro-Hamas fifth column, not just in Britain, but in other European countries. I saw footage before we came on air of pro-Hizb ut-Tahrir rallies in Germany. So this is a huge problem. And yet the Metropolitan Police, I have seen, have been going after people for putting up British flags, the Union Jack. Why are the police, A, not doing more to shut down these people who are... And I'm a free speech absolutist, except for, supporting Hizb ut-Tahrir and, Hamas and groups like that. And also, is Britain going to do... So where's the Metropolitan Police, for one thing? But number two, is Britain going to go down the same road that countries like France and some Scandinavian countries are talking about, which is actively deporting people who are not citizens, who are espousing extremist pro-Hamas, pro-Hizb ut-Tahrir views?
Well, on the deporting people that are clearly hate-filled and don't align with British values, I highly doubt that will happen. I mean, in the last few years alone, particularly since the rise of the migrant crossings over the Channel, reports have indicated that over 100,000 people are unaccounted for, which means over 100,000 people have basically disappeared into the interior of the country. We really don't honestly have a clue of the kinds of people that are in this country. Immigration has swelled to eye-watering heights, and we're now just getting to grips with the fact that actually not only is immigration very high, who are the people that are in this country and what values do they have, and
Bingo.
is it aligned with Britain? And I want to stop being called racist for highlighting that. On the police front, the police have been politicized and as a result demotivated for a very long time. These are the same police force that were bending the knee during the BLM riots and all of that. So they've found themselves in a pickle. Because they've politicized themselves, they now have to fall on one side of the issue or another. I think the fact that you're seeing posters of missing Jewish children and women torn down on the streets of London is generally just heartbreaking. I mean, I met a man a couple of weeks ago who was meant to pick up his mother from Heathrow Airport, and she's a Hamas hostage as we speak. This woman in her 80s. Yeah. And he was completely heartbroken. And this is the thing. One of the things he mentioned was the fallout from this and what's going to happen and the amount of chaos and violence and escalation. And it's so sad that all of these tragic things are happening when there's real grieving to be done. Ultimately, like I said, there are really negative aspects of British society crawling out of the woodwork that are taking advantage of this massive crisis, and it's horrifying to watch.